So you work with people in teams and individually?
Yep.
And how do those differ?
Well, on a one-to-one basis, it's almost like coaching, which means you can discuss far deeper elements of that individual's background, persona, agenda, job. When you're in a larger group, it becomes a little less possible to do that. The larger the groups, the less likely you're going to be able to actually identify individual people's issues. So I tend to work with a maximum of 15 people at a time, unless I'm in a more lecture-driven role, which I also do, because I teach in business schools as well, and I give lectures to much larger groups. And in that situation, the experience, the programs take on a less experiential role. People can't experience as much, because most of what I'm trying to develop and deliver is experiential modules, so people can experience themselves and their limitations working monoculturally, and experience a change in their behavior when they reach the level of being more multicultural, so that they can actually say, I did experience a behavioral change, and that behavioral change gave me some wins, gave me some results, which resulted in me leaving that seminar saying, this is the way I want to start behaving now. That's the way, that would be the ideal that people should leave my seminars or my programs with.
What kinds of situations have you been called in? Yeah, you're generally called in.
Well, as I said, the simple situation of people being assigned to different countries. And most of the time when people are put into that situation, they think that they should have a whole list of do's and don'ts, which I don't subscribe to personally. I think if people have to remember what they should be doing and shouldn't be doing, they actually don't have attention on people. They again have attention on themselves, whether they're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. So that, I'm sorry?
What do you substitute for? What should be substituted, as you see it, for do's and don'ts? Is it this?
It's a less prescriptive way of talking about other cultures. It's not. It's saying, the more attention and more interested you are in the people you're working with, they will tell you what's appropriate. Instead of you having to learn about what's appropriate before you go into that culture, most of the time, if you have that prescriptive way of dealing with a culture, the first time you come across an anomaly, you're going to be thrown. And it's going to push attention back on yourself. And if you have a whole list of do's and don'ts, again, to be able to retain that information and remember that information, again, you're going to have more interest on yourself. So quite simply, get the information you need of appropriate behavior, whether it's with the people you're working with or with other people you're working with. Get the appropriate information from those people. And that way, you're getting information that's current and relevant, and in some cases it may be anomalous to what books publish about those cultures, because you may be dealing with somebody who's lived in another culture for years and years and you didn't know that, so they may be behaving differently. So all of the time you're better off in a situation where you're learning.
Really sorry. That's okay.
We're rolling again.
Yes. Sunlight is annoying, rather.
So you were saying about that books on what to do and what not to do can be misleading because they can be limited in their outlook.
Yeah, and they also limit our behavior in the fact that we want to try to retain that information. And while we're trying to retain it, we're actually disengaged from people because we're more engaged with trying to retain the information. Again, attention on ourselves. So in that sort of an environment where people are going to work in another culture or they're going to live in another culture, I'd rather advise people around general ideas of differences between those cultures to engage with people to find out what's appropriate behavior.
But as you go to engage with them, you need a certain amount of knowledge, I would think.
Yes, and we give them a way in which they can very quickly get a feel for the context for that behavior.
In what way is that?
Well, what we talk about is what are the common social subject areas which contribute towards people's attitudes and values in every country. For instance, education, family, religion, law and order, history. All of those things are constant in every culture. What's the content of that is different in different cultures. So we give people a very simple way of getting a sense of the difference between their attitudes and values and cultures and the ones that they are going to engage with, out of very broad brush differences in those areas, so that people can get a sense of the context out of which people behave differently. So there's this relationship between these attitudes and values, building blocks, like education, family, those type of things, and the correlation between the difference in what a family looks like, what education is like in that culture, what attitudes to religion is like in that culture, what that culture's history is, even what that culture's geography is. It builds up a picture of a very different context for the behavior, and so the behavior is going to be generally quite different. But it should never be the basis of stereotyping a culture. It's just information, general information, which we talk about, to give people a sense of why they would be behaving differently to you, because you're the subject, the content of the subject areas of the attitudes and values that you grew up with is quite different. So in that situation, where people are going to different countries, they need to be equipped to deal with a different environment. But other situations that I can come across is where, as I've said, teams are working, and they may be working virtually from different cultures, and increasingly they are. They're actually interacting with each other through video conferencing, or through Skype, or through email communication, which becomes subtly a little more different, but the principles are still the same. It may be, as I've said earlier before, where there are teams within corporations that are trying to work harmoniously together in different departments. The legal department and the marketing department, for instance, are having difficulties. They all have different points of view, and they're like different cultures. You'll have a situation where, as I work in the NHS, the National Health Service, that you'll have people who are working with mentally sick people, and people who are working with disabled patients. The disabled community and the able-bodied community are different cultures. Mentally ill people working with mentally sound people are different cultures. Nurses and patients are different cultures. Management and employees are different cultures. So, and sometimes I would get involved in ethnic differences within communities. So I've worked for police forces in different countries. I've worked for government agencies in different countries. In some cases I've worked with attitudes towards people who, in charities, who go in to help communities in different countries, and understanding how to go into those countries without being resisted. But all of these scenarios have a commonality to them all. Very simply, a very simple commonality, and that's really what I'm addressing. I'm constantly addressing this common theme that, quite simply, if you're showing interest in people, you're going to get more cooperation from them.